Mr. Harper, thanks for giving us this interview. Can we start with a brief history, of your credentials, your career?
Yes, of course. I joined the Metropolitan Police in 1974 after 3 years in the military police. And in the Metropolitan Police, I served in Brixton and did my probationary period in Brixton, then did a year in the robbery squad at Brixton as a trainee detective. I served in other areas of South London, specialising eventually in child abuse and street robberies and an awful lot of sexual offences such as rape and indecent assault. In 1979 and 80, I spent time in West Belfast working with the Royal Ulster Constabulary, and I worked not only in West Belfast investigating terrorist crimes such as murders and hijackings and shootings, but also at the interrogation centres where I was engaged in interrogating terrorists of all colours. On returning to the Metropolitan Police, I was engaged in for a short period in uniform, during which time I worked at Tottenham in the Broadwater Farm riots and in the Wapping disorders, before returning back to CID again, and spent about 4.5–5 years as a detective inspector at Peckham, where again I was dealing with on average about a rape every 2 or 3 days, and I think during my last year at Peckham I dealt with something like 9 murders. So wide experience there. I joined Strathclyde Police in 1991 and served in the East End and the West End of Glasgow before moving to Jersey in 2002.
Okay, shall we go on to, I don't like to mention this, but it's our local media again. I don't want to dwell on it. The local media can't seem to mention your name without mentioning the infamous coconut. Please put the record straight. As you see it, we have seen scientific evidence which tells us this item contained 1.6% collagen, and despite deputies Wimberley, Hill, Pittman, myself and others asking questions how a piece of child's skull turns into coconut containing 1.6% collagen, we've still not seen any evidence. In your professional opinion, evidence-based, is it coconut or is it skull?
Well, the truth of the matter is that I don't know for 100% exactly what it is. What I do know and what the facts are as follows. This item was found by an anthropologist who is a very well-respected anthropologist who has worked all over the world in recovering human remains, and that anthropologist identified that item as a piece of a child's skull. She even told us where it came from on the morning she found it. It was kept in our store for a few days, and it was eventually sent off to the laboratory in Oxford. Now, even that in itself disproves some of the stupid lies and misapprehensions have been put about, notably by some of the Jersey media, but also by 1 or 2 journalists in the UK as well, because they were saying that I was told that this was not a human skull the day after we found it. Well, the item was still sitting in our store the day after we found it, and it eventually went off to the laboratory in Oxford, who came back and said, first of all, it's very badly degraded. We don't think we'll be able to find any collagen in it, and they kept referring to it at this stage as a skull and as a piece of bone. In fact, I think they referred to it as the Jersey skull. They then came back and says, look, we were wrong about this. We've actually found 1.6 collagen, which is quite a bit above the quantity of collagen that we need to date this thing. So we're quite comfortable that we will be able to date it now. We'll find out when this skull went in the ground and when it died. And then a few days later, they came back again and says, look, we can't date it because the collagen is very, very badly degraded, which means either that it might not be skull, or B, that the skull is so badly degraded that it's just impossible to date it. And that was the situation then, as it was. And as far as I'm aware, I've never ever been told anything that has advanced it from that. That it was either a possibility that it wasn't skull, or there was a possibility that it was skull which was so badly degraded that it wouldn't be able to be dated. Now, the coconut nonsense came from a throwaway comment where this piece of evidence, which had been meticulously audited and tracked on our systems, was then passed about by these people in the laboratory to others whose names we were never given, which would have rendered it totally useless in evidence in any event, who said, oh, it looks like a piece of coconut. But there was never any scientific substance to that. There was never any definitive information as to just what it was at that stage. And when it came back, of course, our anthropologist was quoted as saying she had changed her mind and that it was no longer her opinion that it was human skull. But of course, I just proved this by showing her log, where she wrote on her log when the item came back that she was now not so sure because the item had changed in size, texture and appearance. Now that opened up all sorts of questions, and if we'd tried to use that in evidence, the defence would have run a bus through us by saying that we couldn't prove it was the same item that went away. And of course we couldn't, because it had been handed about while it was away. So my definitive answer is that I have no definitive information on that. As I say, it could well be human skull, but it may not be, and I suspect we will never know properly.
So I suppose at best we can say it's inconclusive. Nobody can say one way or the other what this item is.
Absolutely. We put it across this laboratory report, and I have to emphasise they've got the evidence to carbon date it, not to tell us what it was. They're not qualified to tell us what it was. The anthropologist who found the item was very qualified to say what it was, and she thought at the time that it was a piece of human skull, and she identified the part of the skull that she believed it came from. Now, when it came back, she said that she could no longer be so certain, but that's a world of difference from what the media in Jersey were quoting as saying that she had changed her mind, and what I believe that Gradwell and Mr. Warkup were also saying. They quoted her saying she had changed her mind, and that was totally untrue.
Yeah, okay. So when our mainstream media are saying it's coconut, in your opinion, that isn't based on scientific evidence? It's not
based on any statement of fact that I have ever seen or have ever received, or indeed, it's contrary to everything that we were told. There was no definitive conclusion, and it flies in the face of the fact that the laboratory said that they found collagen, which of course is not found in coconut. Collagen is only found in mammals, including humans.
Thanks for wrapping that up and putting the record straight. Now, we're going to have a committee of inquiry into the whole child abuse atrocities investigation, possible cover-up. What or who do you believe ought to be included in its terms of reference?
The most important thing in the terms of reference has got to be looking at how the abuse happened, because I don't think that the government in Jersey have ever really accepted that this abuse took place. They give throwaway comments and backhandedly say, yes, we're sure that some misbehaviour and some abuse went on, but they have consistently downplayed the seriousness of the abuse that went on. They've consistently thrown insults and tried to discredit the victims, and they have just never really ever admitted that there was a chronic, systematic and known about period where the most horrific child abuse went on, and they have downplayed this since day one. So that needs to be at the very forefront of any committee of inquiry as to how this abuse happened, how it was allowed to happen, and how the authorities failed to bring it to justice. And I think that's got to include not only the caring agencies in Jersey, it's also got to include the States of Jersey Police at that time. Certainly it's got to include the Law Officers Department and from the Attorney General down. And then it's also going to look at some politicians as well, the part they played. And I think that's very, very important. And it's got to include, those are the main things that it's got to include: how this abuse happened, the extent of the abuse, because I don't think that we even, even with the strides forward that we made in getting people to come forward, I don't think that we uncovered the full extent of it. And I think that there's a lot more to come out yet, including the culpability of those in charge of the children's homes of Jersey at the times concerned.
Well, there could be possibly a sticking point because, to your knowledge, are there people still employed by our government in positions of power or authority that were suspects in the child abuse investigation that were never charged? If so, how many do you believe are still employed by our government?
I could think of at least 4 in fairly senior positions who are still there. I may be a little bit out of date on that, but there are certainly 4, the last I heard, which was about 15 months ago, and certainly 2 or 3 of those are still employed in very senior positions who were suspects in the inquiry, priority suspects, I have to say, in the inquiry, also, in my view, against whom there was evidence to have charged them, and if they'd been in the United Kingdom, they would have been charged. I have no doubt about that.